And welcome to Pharmaceutical Soccer here on the YouTube channel. I am Clay Trainum. This is a brand new series that we're bringing you. And if you want to listen to more Nashville Soccer Club type stuff, check out our podcast on all your favorite podcast apps. Also, you can listen to us every Monday at 9 p.m. on 102.5 The Game. Now, in this series, I'm going to be talking with lots of people from around the Nashville soccer community that maybe don't directly have something to do with Nashville Soccer Club. And on this first episode, we're going to talk to Charles Morrow from Lipscomb University. Charles, how are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, Clay.
So Lipscomb has both a men's and women's soccer program. They've both been very successful the last few years. And this is now a very weird time in college athletics, as it is in all sports, especially with COVID-19 going on. So first off, before we get started, what's the latest from Lipscomb in regards to COVID?
Well, I think I can give you an answer for today, and it will probably change next week. We've as a school and as a conference, I think we held out really as long as we could in terms of postponing the season. By the time we issued a statement as a conference that we were postponing the fall, the NCAA had already ruled that 50% of the teams that for Division I had already pulled out, and that a fall championship wasn't going to happen. So we spent a lot of the summer leading up to August really sort of preparing for how this fall would look, and I feel happy about the decision. I feel like just tracking what's going on with COVID, there is a hope for a vaccine in the new year. Whether that happens remains to be seen, but I think that there is a hope that we can have a more normal season in the spring than we can have now, and really for those seniors that are graduating, and really all the players, what you hope for is to have some semblance of a competitive season, and I think that looks better in the spring than it does now. So we right now we're in a group of schools that will not allow any outside competition this fall. There may be some schools that will allow some outside competition this fall. All that is sort of up in the air right now as the NCAA and the Division I member schools and conferences try to figure out what this spring will look like, come up with dates for a spring championship, hopefully. The truth is there might not be a spring championship this spring for men's soccer. I think that there would have to be it would have to get voted in, and right now what the NCAA is putting forward is a spring championship with a reduced field, and if they take away all the automatic qualifiers for the NCAA tournament, and then so conferences are looking at a reduced schedule, conference schedule, and the possibility of going into the postseason undefeated and missing out on an NCAA tournament bid, I think that they would probably vote to bail on that and just play for conference tournaments. So all that really in the next week, 2 weeks, we hope we'll have some more clarity on. Right now, it's sort of a luxury in that we have a semester to prepare for our season in the spring, which in college soccer is so condensed and compact that we would have already played several games at this point, probably 3 games by now, and we're sort of enjoying the ability to periodize players in an appropriate way and build them up to game levels without having to worry so much about injury along the way. So it's been a nice change in that regard, but just dealing with COVID protocol and how the CDC is changing things as we go along, I'm glad that we have people in positions at the university to make decisions and give guidance, because it is hard to follow.
So kind of you spoke on something there, and I kind of want to break off of that a little bit from the COVID stuff. There's long been this movement to move college soccer to like a year-round sort of schedule with a spring championship season, partially for some of the reasons you mentioned there about having more time with the kids to develop them better before title time. If there is any sort of silver lining to the way things are playing out, would it be testing the feasibility of such a setup?
Yeah, certainly. And I think it's interesting. The 21st century model was set to be voted on this past spring. And we were tracking well and felt like we were gaining momentum. And then COVID hits, and that sort of just gets shelved. There was a thought from the coaches initially, like, hey, let's go ahead and scrap the fall. And, I think ultimately we felt like that was a little just too transparent in that we'd like a spring season anyway, or we'd like an extended season. And we need to see how things play out. And ultimately, in terms of COVID, I think all fall sports are going to be tied to football's decision to some degree until some football conferences started folding. But I do think that the way the hidden blessing in all of this is that we do get to test feasibility of what a spring season would look like. It's long been argued of how do we do this with shared facilities for programs that have lacrosse, and how would you do it and manage it for northern teams that have inclement weather during that early spring. But we're going to see this year how all that plays out. Ultimately, we think it can be done. And the U.S. Development Academy has been doing it for years, where they have northern teams playing 10-month seasons with a winter break. So I think it can be done, and think that we will definitely have a better idea of issues and problems surrounding it, if there are any, at the end of this spring, assuming that we can pull off a spring season and spring championship.
So we were talking a little bit before this call. I used to work with some mid-major and NAIA soccer programs, and the concern has always been, when this topic has come up, has been like a staffing issue, a more logistical than an actual, on the field sort of thing. And being at a smaller school like Lipscomb, has there been sort of administrative support behind the idea of a spring season, or is it just kind of up in the air?
We are supportive of it. I'm supportive of it 100%, but as an administration here, we are supportive of it. And it's a student athlete welfare issue. And you look at injuries that are happening. I think in the last 5 years, I've probably had 4 or 5 hip labrum tears from players. That's just overuse and doing too much in a short amount of time. So we're supportive of it. Now, we have it better than some. We have it better than most in some regards, in that we have an athletic trainer that, he has some. The way that it typically works is that you'll have an athletic trainer that will cover you full time in the fall and be with you sort of part time in the spring, and he'll have other duties that athletic trainer will be with in the spring. We made a move several years ago to having more of a full-time athletic trainer that's with us every practice, travels with us at all our games. He does have some duties, like he'll go to the indoor track conference meet, and he might go to the outdoor track conference meet. But other than that, he's with us full time. So from an athletic training perspective, we're good. But you're absolutely right. when you start looking at starting up that spring season, and basketball is just wrapping up, and baseball and softball are starting, and then at some schools you might have lacrosse in there. Just your game operations staff is run really thin during that time period. So, and for us, that's sort of the sticking point. Now, we've also said that while it's heavier during that time, because of the lightened schedule in the fall, those operations staff, they'll actually get time back in the fall because of a lightened load. I think the proposal, it does have points institution by institution that you would have to work out and work through. But what we found doing a study was that it is, all those issues are solvable. And the potential gain that you get out of it for the student athlete is totally worth it. We were involved as a conference early on. Part of the problems that we're seeing, and if you've been tracking this movement, you probably know that this has been a topic of conversation for probably 10 plus years within at least the Coaches Association. Part of the issue that we ran into was that larger universities, larger, Power Five coaches just weren't getting the time with their athletic administration to walk through the plan with them. So basically what we did as a conference was we sort of did a case study several years ago where we looked at it. Initially, the big sticking point was finances. You talked a little bit about the issue that it might cause operationally, but the first hurdle was just, this sounds expensive to do it 10 months. And so we did a case study just financially. And what we found was that basically it's a wash. There might be some years where it's a little more expensive to do this 21st century model. There might be some years where it may be a little less expensive, but ultimately the difference was not significant either way.
And sort of I feel like a decent number of people who will be listening to this will be somewhat familiar with college soccer, but one of the biggest positives from this is based on student athlete, not only health generally, but also academically, and perhaps most relevant to anybody who's watching this, developmentally, having normal game weeks. Is that the biggest sort of reason to push forward with it?
Yes. I mean, it's totally a student athlete welfare issue. I mean, ultimately there are ancillary there's ancillary benefits to it, such as developmentally, I think it gives us a better opportunity to develop players. But also I think it gives us a better championship. Our fall championship right now is sort of sandwiched in a time where college football playoffs are ramping up, college basketball is starting, and there's just not a lot of market space to market that championship, where I think that spring championship, not only is there more space to market it and televise it, but I also think you're going to get better weather, better playing conditions, and a higher level of play. But yes, not only the big thing is it lets these student athletes be true students in that one game a week. I think there's room for maybe 2 midweek games, 3 midweek games throughout the year, but really you're talking about one game a week, and it's on the weekends. So you're talking about 0 missed class time. And, I think that it gives the men's soccer players, and I think the women would follow eventually, but it gives these soccer players an opportunity to be, to have a more normal college student life throughout the week. In the fall, when a freshman comes in, they don't get a true college student experience until the spring. They might go through the whole fall, make very few friends outside the soccer team. And that first semester, I sort of equate it to trying to drink water out of a fire hose. It's just so much is coming at you athletically, so much is coming at you academically. The social piece, especially that freshman year, first semester, I mean, is pretty non-existent.
So have you seen like a noticeable like change dealing with the situation that we're dealing with now in maybe, I mean, I'm sure the players are a little bit upset that they aren't going to be playing games anytime soon, but now that they have time to sort of, I know you have, last I counted, I think around 10 international players,
Mm-hmm.
like they can actually adjust to being on campus and then move forward. Obviously
Yeah,
not ideal times.
right. I mean, we just started class on Monday, and I would say this. I would say there's been a lot of focus here the last few months on physical well-being. My biggest concern right now is just the players' emotional well-being. I mean, we're in a stressful time right now. I mean, in the middle of a pandemic, you're looking for answers, and you're looking for, how do I be safe? And ultimately, other than just locking yourself up in your house, and there's no way. You're always going to have some risk. You're going to have some exposure. And, if you can imagine being a senior right now, the stress of, all right, in a year, I'll be in the working world. That's enough on its own. But when you put on top of that, if you layer on top of that an economy that is sort of struggling right now in many segments, a lot of unknowns in that. It's just a really stressful time, I think, to be a college student right now. Forget student athlete. Being a college student athlete right now, I think, is really stressful. So, we've only started on class on Monday, and it's just Wednesday right now. So, sort of the jury's still out on how these guys will be able to socialize even in a pandemic. It's really hard right now to even do that because, our instructions to student athletes are, we have all these protocols and things that we follow, but the student body doesn't follow any of those, much of the same things that we do. I mean, we have a daily COVID survey that they have to fill out before they can even enter the building. Upon entering the building, Allen Arena, their temperature is taken, and they're given a band for the day that they wear that gives them free access to athletic training room and weight room and those kind of things. So the regular student body isn't doing all that, and we've been training 2.5 weeks at this point. We're still training in pods. We're not training with a full team at this point. I think that we're safe to, but the big question is what happens with the virus once everyone else gets to campus. So we're hopeful that in a couple weeks we'll be released to train as a full team. The social aspect is still up in the air. We'll see how that plays out. But in some ways, from a functionality standpoint, I think this is a good year to see how playing in the spring is possible for college soccer. I don't know that we'll see all the benefits of it just because we're in strange times right now.
So we'll use that to move on to some other college soccer trends.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to grade everything. One of the biggest things that I've noticed, and this has kind of hurt me a lot as a college soccer fan, is, and this started well before COVID, is the shrinking of men's programs across the country.
Mm-hmm.
I I'm sure you agree with this, but I feel like a lot of people undervalue the potential of college men's soccer in not only developing, student athletes, but obviously developing people. And seeing a program like Cincinnati close down, obviously New Mexico very famously shutting down. Um, I imagine coming off of the successful tournament runs, getting the renovated stadium, it's a very weird time to be a college men's soccer coach aside from COVID.
Yes and no. I mean, I think when you look at the programs that have shut down here recently, and you can look at Cincinnati, I think New Mexico was probably just athletic mismanagement, but at the heart of it, it's the same thing. Cincinnati wants to play big time college football, and they are chasing that money, and they're willing, obviously, to do whatever it takes to chase that. And I would be very surprised if over the next few years, if Cincinnati remained in the American Athletic Conference. I would also be surprised, quite honestly, if some of those teams in the American weren't taken in by another Power Five, or they might be given a sort of a status as a Power Five. But at the heart of both of those, I think COVID is with Cincinnati was just the excuse
Oh,
that they
absolutely.
needed, right? I mean, this is something that has been talked about at Cincinnati for years and years, and and it's also part of the reason. It's interesting that you bring this up right now after we just finished talking a little bit about the 21st century model. I think, and what I hear, there have been Power Five athletic directors that have said, if this model gets approved, we will start men's soccer, because all of a sudden you're able to market it instead of playing. Basically right now we play weekend and midweek games. Well, you can really only market that weekend game. The midweek game, only your diehards are going to come to. You've got, it's a school night, so families can't really get out to it. But if you're doing one game a week, and the level of play, the standard of play is going to be better. I think there's a real opportunity to market that in the way that soccer is moving the market in the U.S. right now. I think athletic directors are attaching dollar signs to that. So I really do think that if that proposal were to be taken on, I think that you would see college soccer become more relevant in the standpoint of more resources, time, money put into it, because I think that it could become instead of a Olympic sport that is a drain on the university, actually a money generator and something to produce revenue. So it's interesting that you bring that up. I think that there are schools, quite honestly, that have soccer to sort of fulfill their Division I requirement of having the sports. Obviously, their emphasis is on other sports. We're lucky right now that the A-Sun is a conference, and Lipscomb being a part of the A-Sun is a conference that's basketball driven. We don't have the drain of football, American football. So there is space to promote soccer as the sport in the fall. But yes, I think it's a weird time to be a college soccer coach, because on one hand you're hearing, the American university system, the collegiate game isn't producing top level players. But if you look across the MLS and even with the national team, that's not exactly true. I mean, there's plenty of players that have gone through the university system, even if they didn't go through a full 4 years, that certainly benefited from that, that are high-level players. There will still be players, and there'll always be players that your Pulisics that obviously at a young age are so far beyond or have the potential to go and play elsewhere. I think that will still exist, but I think that more and more we're seeing that we don't have to adopt an English model to fit America. America is so unique that we can take parts of different models, create our own. And certainly I do think there's more and more of a sense that if done right, that the university system in college soccer can be part of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's always, especially with the way that our system is now over here, like there's always going to be people falling through the cracks. There's always going to be people that don't end up in an academy system, and college soccer can be a potential landing point. I do think the influence of international players in college soccer is also kind of interesting. One of the guys I used to cover down at Georgia Gwinnett, he didn't really break through in England at all. Comes plays in NAIA. NAIA is one of those places where you have some teams that, I mean, there's not a lot of talent there, but then
Right.
you have certain teams in the NAIA where they're as good as any Division I team. And
Right.
some of those guys who have come over, overlooked in their own countries, overlooked in other countries, turn around and get professional contracts here.
That's
and,
right.
and build up through the system here. And I think college is a good way to sort of bridge that gap for some
Right.
of them. I mean, I mentioned this earlier, but you guys have 10 international students. I mean, that's kind of the idea for the
Right.
people that are career minded. I'm sure that's part of their idea when they come over.
Right. Well, most of our international players would have had professional contract options, and they chose college over that. And I think you'll start to see the American player. It'll be really interesting over the next 10 to 15 years to track players who forgo college, sign that USL contract or sign an MLS contract, and then they get stuck in the USL, and they never see the big payday that they were hoping for. That's what we're seeing with if you talk to our international players and you ask them, specifically English players, why did you choose to come to Lipscomb versus sign a lower level contract back home? I mean, they'd almost laugh at you because, like, don't you know that's a meat market? And sure, it might be great for a year or two, but then the next crop of guys come in, and if I don't develop, I mean, the opportunity to get an education outweighs the risk in sort of entering that. So the guys that do have the grades, the guys that are career minded, the guys that see opportunity beyond soccer, more and more are choosing. It's an interesting dynamic. Top players in England that are sort of betweeners that, they're not going to get picked up by a first division club, but they have options. They are more and more wanting to choose education over pursuing professional soccer. And it's just exactly the opposite here, where if you waive any kind of professional contract, I mean, making $1,200 a month in front of a high school senior, they will most likely always choose the professional route over the college route. It'll be interesting to see the dynamic that has over the next 5 to 10 years. Will players continue to choose that? Will that be worth more than a college education? I tend to think not. So you may see it swing back toward college, and it's really important that college get it right and have the opportunity to get it right, because I think that we can be a huge piece of the development system for soccer here in America. But if we're not taking care of our student athletes, that will never happen. And so big proponent of the 21st century model. I think that if done and done right, it would solve a lot of the issues that we're seeing in college soccer right now.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and move on to talking about Lipscomb now,
Yeah.
as we've covered, I think, every aspect we could possibly cover of the 21st century model. So first off, for those that are watching this and maybe don't know much about you, basically a Lipscomb lifer, right?
A little bit. So, well,
As close as one can be in the coaching ranks, perhaps.
maybe, yeah. So I graduated high school, went to Queens College in Charlotte for a couple years, and ended up transferring to Lipscomb. At the time, Queens was a top 20 Division II team. Just from a school standpoint, thought that Lipscomb might be a better fit. And so I ended up transferring here, knowing that the program was sort of fledgling program, and got here, and it was a struggling fledgling program. It was used primarily for enrollment, very little money or resources put into it, and it was a frustrating time to be a Lipscomb college soccer player at that time. I think, my last year here at Lipscomb, the university sort of reassessed what they were doing and ultimately decided, number one, it's just a men's team. They don't have a women's team to go along with it. We need that for Title IX stuff. I think they were starting to talk about, is the NAI the best fit? Do we need to go Division I? Basically, the program was put on hold for a couple years, and then started back with a women's program as well at the Division I level. Meanwhile, I coached it. I knew I wanted to coach in college, but was also getting married, and I coached at a private school here locally, Good Pasture Christian School, for a couple years, and then decided that if I was going to do it, I needed to go ahead and get into the college game, and worked a year as a volunteer at Vanderbilt. The head coach at the time was Randy Johnson, and did that for a year, and the first assistant ended up leaving, and was lucky enough, just right place, right time, and was hired as the first assistant there at Vanderbilt, and stayed there a couple more years. Went on to coach at a Division II school in Charlotte, North Carolina, Belmont Abbey College, and then this opportunity came up, and really at the time, Belmont Abbey was known as a really good stepping stone for young coaches. If you looked at past coaches, Ken Lola had been there. A guy named Daniel Allen had been there. The previous coach prior to me, Paul Stallsmith, had just gone on to Appalachian State. Funny enough, another casualty here recently. But there was a long list of coaches that had gone on to Division I after just being at Belmont Abbey. And so a buddy of mine that I had coached in the past and was a Lipscomb guy and was coaching here, called me up and said, "Hey, I really need you to know I'm resigning tomorrow, and it's time for you to come home and coach." And at the time, I just sort of laughed at him and said, "Look, Nashville's great and all, but this is my career, and I really don't feel like Lipscomb wants to win, so I'm not coming back."
Can I just say,
Yeah.
I looked at the Lipscomb season last night, the year before you started.
Oh, you win a game.
Well, 80-70 on goals for and against. It was 80-7. Sorry, I said 70.
Yeah.
80
No,
to 7
we
on
wish
goals
it was
for.
80-70.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's stepping into a tough gig.
Yeah. So really, he said, "Well, look, you're an alumni here. You've been in the profession. Why don't you come on the interview and just tell them what they need to do?" And at the time, Lipscomb was also looking at adding non-scholarship football, which I thought was just ludicrous, and would just be this huge financial drain. So I said, yeah, I'm always down for a trip to Nashville. And basically I came in and told them, what I thought as an alumni who was in the profession, what needed to be done. And, to my surprise, they were like, yes, this is what we need. Now, Charles, we can't do this tomorrow, but, we can work on a timetable and we can get you to where we need to be, which was sort of shocking to me. And there were some hardline things that were like, well, okay, but these things have to change immediately. And I was, again, just lucky enough to be right place, right time at a university that was really starting to want to make a commitment into growing their athletics, not just men's soccer, but all the way around. I think when Lipscomb first went Division I, and I think you'd see this across the board with all universities that make that transition, like, you have a sense of what you're getting into, but you really have no idea what of all it entails. So, after coming on the interview, was offered the job and felt good about their commitment going forward. And, I did not think that I would be here 15 years. But, it's really interesting. I've got a lot of colleagues and peers that, every year it seems like they're like, hey, this job's open. Are you interested? Are you, when are you going to start looking? Or, how much longer are you going to be there? I've got other colleagues that really know the situation here, and they're like, you would be a fool to ever leave. And, sort of my goal, my standard for when my time is done here, is if I ever get to a point where I feel like I've sort of maxed out here what I can do and stop, or I'm not the guy to continue progressing the program, then it'll be time for me to go. Luckily enough, number one, we started off with not a lot of history, and we were a pretty bad team. So there was a lot of growth that could happen.
Right.
But even with some of the most recent accomplishments, I still feel like there's more opportunity here for growth. And really the biggest thing I think that's probably kept me here as long as I have is, you alluded to it earlier in sort of college soccer being undervalued for not just player development, but person development. And it's very uncommon as a coach where you feel like the school is a true partner in sort of that total person development. And it's been really, really gratifying to see. It's gratifying to win games and to do things like that, but for to get a player as a freshman and as they leave as a senior, just to be this totally transformed person. And yes, soccer's part of it, but it's really a collective effort here, from student life and academics, and that's really, really gratifying, and probably part of the reason why I've been here as long as I have.
So is that sort of role in coaching the reason why you felt at the start that college soccer was your place and maybe not club soccer, as you see with so many, former players?
Yeah, I love soccer, and I probably couldn't put a finger on it early on in my career, but I love soccer. But I do think I love working with young men in this age group as they are trying to figure out, who it is that they want to be, and start developing those habits. And they're stepping away from their parents, so they don't have this shared vision of how to do life with their parents. They're figuring it out on their own. So for me, yeah, that's a huge part of why I'm in college athletics versus club or professional or whatever it may be. Yes, I love soccer. It's an unbelievable sport, and have a passion for it. But I would say any college coach you talk to, you're going to find at some level a passion for developing young men, and for me, that's what excites me. That's what gets me up every day, and is the real joy of the job. And it just so happens that there's an interesting book. Generally, we do a summer read with our players. And a few years ago, we read a book called Legacy, and it's really a business book, but it's sort of a look into the New Zealand All Black team and sort of what their culture looks like. And they've got a mantra in the book that the team lives by, that sort of like, better people make better All Blacks, and we sort of adopted that as our own. And better people make better Bisons. And certainly, if you look at the team that made the Sweet 16 just a couple years ago, not only do we have an unbelievable unbelievable year on the field, but you look at what we did off the field. We led the nation in GPA that year as a team. I think our team average was 3.78 or something crazy like that. And it really just reinforces, was really just a huge reinforcement for our guys in the program, in that if you approach life and everything you do with the mindset of, if it's going to have my name on it, it's worth doing to my fullest and my best. I think that I don't think it's an accident that we had our best year ever in the classroom and our best year ever on the field. And it really speaks to that student athlete development as a person. It's a really gratifying year for sure.
If we're going to be talking about that team, I need to go ahead and
there we go.
Discard off here.
Yes, love it.
I very much enjoyed that season.
Yeah, so did I. I'm ready to have another one.
Enjoy how cold the ASUN championship game was.
Yeah.
But one of the things.
Don't take it off. Don't take it off, Clay. You gotta.
Well, I'm trying not to muffle.
Okay.
If I should have thought to put it back here.
I don't know why it's not on the wall.
Oh, we'll find a place. If you can see, there's a stairway right
We're
here
waiting for the frame.
Like 800 MLS cards on it. Don't worry.
Yeah.
It'll find its place.
There you go.
I can't wear it if it's on the wall.
There you go. That's true.
So a lot of coaches would approach, a run like that, getting over the second straight ASUN tournament win, and then getting into the tournament and winning some games as like the capstone of like their career at a particular school. And you're staying at Lipscomb was very important to you. Like when you're coming home after that, it was a heartbreaking loss to Kentucky in the round of 16. You're coming home thinking, I guess, instead of that, like, we were this close, we can get there again.
Oh, absolutely. And not only can we get there again, but that's something that we can do consistently. And I want that experience for every player that comes here. And really that was, after the first year, we had been, my gosh, we've been a pretty good team for a while, but we had this string of really tough years where, we're one of the two top teams and we get to the conference semifinal and just heartbreaking loss after heartbreaking loss in the semifinal.
4 team at one point.
Yeah.
Years before then.
And really every team that we lost to in the semifinal would go ahead and win in the final. And it was almost like that every year. So we felt like, my wife was like, man, if you guys ever get to the final, you're going to win it. No question. So it was really, really awesome to get over that hump in 17. Even still the seniors, the guys on the team were so mad after we went up and lost to Butler, just because they felt like that was such a letdown. And Butler was a good team. And that loss is all on us, but they were not happy with the season.
As a Ball State grad and someone from Evansville, the hatred I have for Butler University is unmatched, and I was so upset after that.
Well, it's hard to dislike them. I mean, they're a good team, and I got a lot of respect for Paul Snape up there at Butler, and good guy.
Entirely based on the logo.
Yeah, I get it. But they were pretty bummed after that, and for a program to have just had their best year ever, the letdown and disappointment from the year was shocking. I mean, guys came in the office at end-of-year meetings and were just like, "This is awful." So, we felt like we had a pretty good shot of having a good team the following year. It wasn't just this magical year. I mean, we started off pretty rough. We're trying some new things, and really it was just we know we can. Basically, we said we know we can play in this system, but the players, if you look at them in a different way, maybe this system we could be different. So we played a different system for half the year. And it wasn't all bad. We had some pretty good results. We just couldn't find consistency in it. And then toward the end of the year, we just said, scrap it. We're going back playing our normal way and normal system, and just went on a run there, and it was really, really fun.
I imagine you're probably going to be telling the story of the first weekend in the tournament for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Is that the wildest travel you've ever experienced? Yeah. Now, for those who aren't familiar, it was a trip to Washington, who was ranked in the top 25, then turning around and going to Orlando to take on the top 10 team in UCF in a span of like 3 or 4 days?
Yeah. So, we found out that we found out on a Monday what our draw was, and the way it works is you get your draw, and then you call the NCAA travel partner to figure out your travel arrangements. All the NCAA stuff is handled through them, or all the travel is handled through the NCAA during the tournament. So I called, and they're like, "Yeah, we've been waiting for your call. You're sort of the odd man out. There was nobody." They try to match people up regionally. You were just sort of the odd man out, and you're getting sent to University of Washington. It's like, oh my gosh, are we going to, can you find flights? And they're like, absolutely not. We can't find flights for your whole team. So you just tell us you're leaving Wednesday, and just let us know when you want the charter plane to be there. So going there was awesome, because we set our time. We showed up at the airport, but not the real international airport, Nashville International. We went to the executive lot, and it was basically you walk off the plane and walk off the bus right onto the plane.
Awesome.
It was fantastic. So we win at Washington, and it was an overtime game, and we won in PKs, and our goalkeeper had an unbelievable game, but we ended up subbing him because we had a guy who was really good on penalty kicks, and so we ended up winning. And there's just so many snapshots of after the game, guys celebrating in the locker room and that kind of stuff. And we get back to the hotel, and I'm like, guys, we got another game to play. We got to go play UCF and get in and get your sleep. And they're like, Coach, don't worry about it. Just tell the plane to pick us up in a day or two, and we'll get down there. And I'm like, guys, no, the charter plane's gone. Like, we're not getting that again. It was midnight, and we're leaving at 5 the next morning. The plane leaves at 5 the next morning.
Because I remember watching that game. I had to stay up late.
Yeah.
Went to penalties and all that stuff, and then moving from out there to Eastern time.
That's right. It's funny because we got down to Orlando, and everybody's just exhausted, and the NCAA's calling and UCF's calling, and they're like, we need to schedule your practice time, because there was a day in between games, day to travel, a day of rest. You go out and do your practice, and then you played the next day. And basically we were like, we can't even think about practicing right now. We're so exhausted. It'd be more harm than good. We're staying in the hotel. We did a little recovery in the hotel, did no day before training, got to the game, and then we're subbing like 5 minutes into the game, not because of poor performance, but it's just guys are like, Coach, I'm already done. I need a break. So we're able to weather the storm long enough and get it to overtime with UCF, and then score the game winner in overtime. But we had to tire them out before we could play. We absorbed a lot in the first half, and a good part of the second half as well.
Yeah, I didn't even realize you guys didn't practice before then, but it makes sense. I mean, that flight is not an easy flight to begin with. Before
No.
you factor in the time change and then having to be fit the next day, like.
Well, it wasn't a direct flight either, Clay. I mean,
of course, why would it be?
half the team went through Atlanta, and then the other half went through Minneapolis. So it was a long day of travel. NCAA didn't do us any favors there, and really felt fortunate to get out of the weekend with 2 wins. Felt fantastic going into Kentucky, and just a tough luck. Game could have gone either way, and unfortunately went the wrong way for us.
It was setting up for another dose of like late Lipscomb magic.
Oh yeah.
And sure enough, it was there, but there was also some Kentucky magic to be
had.
There
was.
So kind of rolling back through that, like, how do you, obviously last year wasn't, the heights of the previous 2 years, but like, how do you try it? What is your process on building back up to that look like?
Well, I mean, I think part of it was a mistake on our part. I feel like last year we made some gambles with some international attacking players that just didn't pay off. And ultimately we had guys, one guy, we didn't realize it when we signed him, but we found out late July that, like I said before, most of these international players will have professional options. So we had signed a guy who he was getting these offers and contracts in, didn't know what to do with them, how to work through them. And this was before he got the offer from us. He hired a lawyer to help him go through the contracts, not realizing that the lawyer was also a registered agent in England. So through no fault of his own, really, the NCAA ruled him ineligible. So had a couple guys fall through last year and really trying to shoot for the stars, left us a little bit depleted attacking wise. It's funny, we looked at last year and the year before statistically. We didn't score the goals that we did the previous year, but we actually created more chances last year than we did the year before. So just felt like we were missing that potency up top in the attack. So really, it's for us, we know the standard that we need to be at. We know the culture that we need to have. And we just got to really dial those things in, and really starts with recruiting guys that you feel like can play at that standard, but also are good people and that will fit in with a team culture.
You've had a little bit of consistency on the coaching side of things as well, not just yourself, but you've had a lot of guys that have been around for a while, so they know exactly what they're looking for, which I feel like is a bit of a rarity, especially coming off a run like that.
Yeah, a little bit, really fortunate. Garrett McLaughlin was here as a volunteer for a time, and then went away and coached a little bit and has come back in that role. And then Stephen Lunny's just been invaluable, having him as long as we've had. Stephen's a little bit tricky in that he's an international guy and there's always visa issues, but it's certainly been a benefit to the program to have some of that consistency.
out of curiosity, and this is really just for my information and not necessarily Pharma Soccer's, how many times does Stephen Lunny bring up Martin Methodist's national championship?
Hardly ever.
Really?
Hardly ever.
This was your chance to throw him under the bus.
You know what? Not really ever, unless we ask him about it. Unless something is posed. You know, he was working here a long time before I even. You know, apparently, was it the national championship game? It was one game where he actually was the last. He took the last PK to win the game, and there's video of it. It took me forever before that even surfaced. So no, he's been absolutely fantastic for us, and has had quite a playing career himself in terms of winning the national championship in AI, but is really focused, has been focused on just helping us become the best program we can, and you know, doing his part to do that. So.
All right. Well, I think our time is about up, so I just wanted to wrap up with you real quick. So I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you sharing the stories about Lipscomb with me. And
Yeah, absolutely.
And whenever the next Lipscomb game will be, I'm going to try my best to be there.
Awesome. Well, let me know. Appreciate you doing this for soccer and the Nashville soccer community, and however I can help, let me know.
All right, we'll do.
Awesome.